Our next speaker will encourage us to keep the flame burning. His credentials as a champion include being honored with the Friend of Child Nutrition Award from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. His long career in education has led him to his current role as superintendent of Wake County Public School System. Please join me in welcoming Robert Taylor.
How you doing? Get on your feet. Stand up. No, I'm just joking. So good afternoon to you all. It is certainly my pleasure to be here. I think I have the easiest part of this meeting today, and that is to talk about how you can keep your flame. And I think you've already had all of that. If you've been here today, I hope that you've had an opportunity to listen and engage with your friends, listen to presenters, and know and understand why this work is important. And so I think it is very easy what I have to do to keep you encouraged about why this work is important. And so the first thing that I'll say to you is that before I get into any of the things that I want to share with you, keep your focus on the outcomes for children and families. If there's nothing else that will keep you encouraged and keep your flame flaming high, it is to know and understand that it is the impact that you have with them. It is about the outcomes that you have for children. What I can tell you is that schools are a big part of outcomes for children. And we know that school nutrition is a tremendous part of what those outcomes are. And so I want you to go back and remember to tell the people that work in your programs that see these children every day, know and understand they have a tremendous impact on children. And so when I think about my own education and coming through school and the people that impacted me, we normally think of teachers, don't we? Well, I actually think of more than teachers. I do think of Mr. Smith, who was my high school math teacher. I think of Mrs. Varnado, who was my second grade teacher. I think of Miss Ellis, who was my kindergarten teacher. I can go through all of the different people that taught me. But I also think about Mr. Henry, who was our custodian. He had a tremendous impact on me in how I viewed life and what I saw as a work ethic. I also think about Connie Clark. Connie Clark was a child nutrition worker that worked in the cafeteria. And so she was a person that always encouraged us, particularly as she encouraged me. And so I know and understand that when I think about the people that had an impact on me, it goes well beyond teachers and principals. Support staff and particularly child nutrition workers are a huge part of that. So always go back and remind everyone that works in your programs and with you that they do have an impact on children, and children will remember everything that you say to them, everything that you do to support them. They remember that when they become adults, and they want to be the same thing for someone else. And so, with that, I want to, yeah, there we go. I like that. I like that. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Leah. And so, part of about keeping your flame is about the relationships that you build. And so I want to talk for you briefly about the people that are involved in these relationships. You know, the work that you do is very important, but the most difficult part is trying to get other people to understand why the work is important. Now, believe me, they do know it's important. Don't ever think that they don't. But as administrators and teachers in schools, sometimes we forget all the things that are connected to student achievement. And we know that nutrition is one of those things. We can talk about mental health, we can talk about safety, but we can certainly talk about school nutrition and how that's connected almost to the hip with everything that we do in schools. And so think about those relationships. One of those, how many child nutrition directors do we have in here? Couple, two, three, raise your hand. Good. There you go. There you go. So one of the things I want you to do is to work to have an active relationship with your superintendent. And I know that depending on the size of your district, that may vary. You may not have the opportunity to get in and see the superintendent as you need to. But that is one of the most important relationships that you can establish. What does my superintendent know and understand about this program, and how do I connect with them? When I was superintendent in Bladen County Schools, Amy Stanley was my child nutrition director. Now, I know Amy is in New Hanover County. Is New Hanover in the house? Somewhere, maybe. Ooh, New Hanover. What about Bladen County? Are you in the house? Ooh, maybe somewhere. What about Wake County? No, so there we go. But somebody asked Amy many years ago, how did you establish that kind of relationship with your superintendent? And Amy and I really didn't know or understand, but we had a relationship. And she could always come into my office and we talked all the time. And so she knew and understood how important child nutrition was for me, or school nutrition. And so if you don't have that relationship, make sure that you work to actively create that kind of relationship with the superintendent. Because what I can tell you as a superintendent, that whatever is important to me becomes important to everyone else. And so it is about how do you get this to become an important part of what a superintendent wants to do. I also want you to think about principals. I want you to think about teachers, because they are at the core of how any kind of work that you do gets done in the school. So when you begin to talk about innovative programs that exist outside the classroom, people have a tendency to push back, don't they? Well, I don't know if we want to do this or not. We've got to do blah, blah, blah. But once you get them to have a relationship with you, understand what's important, then they begin to engage on this work. And they're going to be some of the biggest supporters that you have. And so getting a superintendent involved, getting a principal involved, getting teachers involved, that is how you get programs and efforts to move forward. And I certainly want you to think about the parents, because they are a big part of it as well. You saw all the information that's been shared about the different benefits that all of the programs have. You want parents to know that as well. But certainly make sure that you establish those same relationships with students, because this work is about how you impact them. And that is one of the most important relationships you can have, is knowing and understanding what is it that my students want, what is it that my students desire. The next thing I want to share with you is about programmatic knowledge. There's nothing more powerful than keeping your flame flaming and blowing and firing up than if you have an active and vibrant program. So, did any of you all know who Andy Reid is? Who is Andy Reid? Coach of who? Yeah, Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not a Kansas City fan. I like it. But I want you to think about how Andy Reid feels and how the coach and the ownership of the Arizona Cardinals feel today. Why does Andy Reid feel good? He's got a winning, active program that puts people in the stands, brings Super Bowl trophies 3 out of the last 5 years or something like that. The Rams got one in there too. I'm a Rams fan, by the way. But I say that to say that know and understand how to make your program a vibrant program. And when you do that, there's nothing like success. If you have a successful program, then you're going to show up to work every day, happy, wanting to put in some work and smiling with everything that you do. But if you have a program that's not vibrant, then work is not going to be as pleasant for you. So that means you need to know and understand about the CEP process. In some districts, it's a great thing. Our free and reduced numbers are so high, we can implement this program and feed 100% of the students in our district. Other districts, you may have to think about how far can we expand the program before it begins to have a negative financial impact on the district. You have to know what that is, and you have to be able to share that with your constituents to say, we've got to get as close to this flame as possible without damaging other things in the district. And so the only way you do that is you know those numbers and you know what's effective in your building. Also know about building quality programs. You know, how do you make sure that program is financially solvent? Because we know it is an enterprise program. And so know and understand, is there something that I can do to not only but do cost savings, but also still provide quality meals to children, because everything is not about saving a dollar. But we also know that if the program is not profitable and functioning on its own, then that makes it difficult. Absolutely, unequivocally think about how you can expand breakfast programs, lunch programs, feeding programs, anything within your program that expands it and makes it something that's accessible to more people. So if I go back 15 or 20 years ago, how many people were doing breakfast in the classroom? No one. You never heard of it. But now that's a program that we've been able to expand. We know and understand what the benefit is, and we have to know how to get people to buy into that program. And so that goes back to that relationship that I talked about with teachers. And so I want to give you an example of one of the things that I faced, and you have to speak truth to power sometimes. And so we had a breakfast in the classroom program, um, and the custodian came to me, and the student obviously had a milk, chocolate milk at that, so that leaves a different stain, right? And they went in the bathroom and they thrown it against the wall or whatever the case may be. And so the custodian brought me, Dr. Taylor, I want you to look at this. This is why we don't need to do the program and blah, blah, blah. And I've got to come. I said, let me stop you right there. This sounds like a supervision problem. This has absolutely nothing to do with a student coming in and throwing a milk on the wall, because somebody had to see the kid leave with it. There you go. Somebody had to see the kid go in there. Somebody had to know that this child was unsupervised. So what you have to do is, when people come back with those negative connotations, it is about, are we doing what's best for a student? When you first began to implement those breakfasts in the classrooms, who was mad? Well, I shouldn't say they were mad, but a lot of times teachers pushed back, didn't they? We got to trash this and we got to blah, blah, that. But did you ever stop to think that the participation rate is through the roof, versus if they have to go to the lunchroom and there's a late bus and blah, blah, this and blah, blah, that. And so you have to get them to think that when you know your children and you know who struggle outside the classroom and know what their conditions are, but sometimes we forget about that when we're classroom teachers. And so you have to say, help me to clear my thinking, teacher. Are you telling me that you're going to let one bag of trash that a student would love to take out, because students love to do, Mr. Johnson, can I take out the trash? They love to do that kind of stuff. So you say to the teacher, help me to clear my thinking. Are we going to get your displeasure with a bag of trash that may leak a little milk in the way of feeding a child that you know comes to school every day home? I love it. I love it. So that's what that part of the flame is about, is your programmatic knowledge, how you build a robust and vibrant program so you can be like Andy Reid and hoist that trophy up at the end of every football season. But that's what you got to do. I also want you to think about the activity with the public. And so if there's anything that keeps your flame going, it is to know that your work is making people look at school nutrition differently. We have commissioners that are saying, how do we feed more children? We have the General Assembly saying, well, maybe we need to take another look at this. You saw Kristen Cooper, who was here today, and you know she and her husband, Governor Cooper, are staunch advocates of school nutrition programs and the work that we do. So know and understand that your work is impacting people outside of the school building and making them look differently at the work that you do and what's important. And so I remember it was a couple years ago. Dr. Harvey and I went to testify in front of the Joint Legislative Committee. And you know, that was like, woo, Joint Legislative Committee. I've never done something like that before. What is this going to be like? And so, so you know, representatives and senators, and you have great relationships. And so you anticipate that the meeting is going to be a collaborative exchange of ideas, and they ask you salient questions and you give them information. Well, I can tell you, I went into that meeting and I said, I never knew that people had these kind of problems with feeding children. I thought everybody wanted to feed children. This is a subsidy program and it's not the responsibility, it's the parents' job. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? And so I had never seen anything like that before. But I also understand being new to state government and state politics, a lot of that is saber rattling and a showboat and blah, blah, blah. But through all of that. We endured that. We endured the tough questions and raking across the coals. But I want to ask you all something. How many of you all pay more than 8% in indirect costs? Now, if a hand goes up in the room, that means the finance officer is breaking the laws. So how many of you paid more than that 2 years ago or 3 years ago? A lot of hands out to go up in the room because I saw the spreadsheet and paperwork of who charged what. And so before there was a cap put on that, they could charge you whatever they wanted in terms of indirect costs. I'm not going to say whatever they wanted, but that was really not a ceiling. And so for many programs, it was a cash cow. Let's go in and let's raid that. But through the work with the General Assembly and Dr. Harvey and others at the department, guess what we were able to do? Set that cap at 8% to protect your program so you can do what's important for children. And so it is about how we begin to establish those relationships, let them know what is important about the work that you do, and get them to understand why they need to support school nutrition programs. I also want you to think about valuing the work that you do. If there's nothing else to make your flame continue to grow, is to know that your work is important. How many of you all know your work is important? You better ring those cowbells. If you don't know it, I'm going to put you out of here. Know that this program is important. Know that the work that you've done helped this nation out at one of our most critical times. Now, I want you to go back and think about the time between March the 16th, 2020, all through the summer. You all served millions of meals. Millions. And the reason I know that is because when I was in Bladen, we served 1 million meals. And when I said 1 million meals, that's a lot of meals for this little small county. But what that tells me is that everybody knew that your work fed more than children. Now, how many of you all know that? When you delivered those meals on the bus and the parent came out and you said, how many meals do you need? 12. I don't know, good and doggone well, it ain't but 2 kids in that house. But what did you do? Did you give them 12 meals? No, you didn't. You gave them 13. You said, I'm going to miscount. 1, 2, 3, 4, 12. And it was 13. Think about what your work did for this country and the children and families you were able to feed. So that is a time when we were glad that the government looked in the other direction because we know what we were doing. We were uplifting communities. We were feeding children. We were doing things to keep people safe, fed, and appreciated. So know that your work should be valued. Think about when you had to roll out that PEBT program. Who administered that? Now, a lot of that came through child nutrition, didn't it? And so know and understand that that was important. All those meals that you fed, be proud of the work that you've done. And the last thing I want to share with you, do what's best for kids. It's the only reason you do this work. It's the only reason that I do it. When you do this kind of work with nutrition, how does it make children feel? It makes them feel good. What you want to do is make sure that you're doing work that make children feel good about who they are. Now, why do children go to school? To learn. Reading, writing, and arithmetic, as my grandmother would say. But we already know a hungry mind and an unhydrated brain doesn't function the same as a hydrated brain and a body that's not hungry. And so the work that you do allows children better access to the curriculum. And so we can talk about all of those barriers, but we know nutrition is one of those. It is about the work that you do to create equity and access. Remember, this is an equity program and it allows children to be able to come to school and have access to things that they would not normally have. And also remember that your work is valuable both inside and outside the school. If you remember nothing else, know that. And so I want to leave you with a quote. This is my favorite quote, and it's in my office, and I have it in a frame. And it is about whether or not we do what we know works. Whether or not we do what we know works. And so this is by Ron Edmonds. He's an effective schools guru. And he says, we can, whenever and wherever we choose, educate all children whose schooling is of interest to us. We already know more than we need in order to do that. Whether or not we do it must finally depend on how we feel about the fact that we haven't so far. That's right. You can ring the bell on that one. And so what that means is that we know how important child nutrition is. Well, I love it. We know how important child nutrition is. Other people know how important child nutrition is. But what we've got to do is to put people in the position where they say to themselves, we haven't done this, and I feel guilty for not doing it. So I want to thank each and every one of you for what you do every day when you show up. I want you to know that you and your staff are some of the most important people in a school building. I tell people all the time that as superintendent, I have the most responsibility in the district, but I am not the most important person. And so that means when a child is getting on a bus at 6 o'clock in the morning and the bus driver has been up since 5:30, who is more important to that parent and the student? It's not Robert Taylor who's in the bed still hitting the snooze. Oh, 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes. It's the bus driver. And when that student comes through the lunchroom line and they haven't had a successful day, and you as a child nutrition worker says, hey, Robert, how you doing? Where's that smile I'm looking for? Oh, baby, I'm so proud. I heard you had maybe a difficult time, but you're going to do much better the next time because I believe in you, baby. Or you say, I heard about your test. Miss Leah told me you did really well on your exam. He really did. Those are the kinds of things that you need to remember about why you are important, and you are just as big a piece of what happens to children than anyone else. Thank you.